Hi, good morning students. In the last previous class, we have learnt about autotrophic nutrition. In today's class, we shall learn about heterotrophic nutrition. In heterotrophic nutrition, each organism is adapted to its environment. The form of nutrition differs depending upon the type and availability of food material as well as how it is obtained by the organism. For example, whether the food source is stationary or mobile. There is a range of strategies by which the food is taken in and used by the organism. Some organisms break down the food material outside the body and then absorb it. Example are fungi like bread molds, yeast and mushrooms. Others take in whole material and break it down inside their bodies. Whatever may be taken in and broken down depends on the body design and functioning. Some other organisms derive their nutrition from plants or animals without killing them. This type of nutrition is called parasitic nutrition. This strategy is used by a wide variety of organisms like lice, leeches and tapeworms. Okay students, now we shall learn about how organisms obtain their nutrition. Firstly, let us see in single-celled organisms, the food will be taken in by the entire surface. For example, amoeba, food is taken by using temporary finger-like extensions of the cell. Surface which fuse over the food particle forming a food vacuole. Inside the food vacuole, complex substances are broken down into simpler ones, which then fuses into the cytoplasm. The remaining undigested material is moved to the surface of the cell and thrown out. In paramecium, which is also an unicellular, the cell has a definite shape and food is taken in at a specific spot. Food is moved to the spot by the movement of cilia, which cover the entire surface of the cell. This you can see in the figure nutrition in amoeba. Now students, we shall learn about nutrition in human beings. In human beings, the alimentary canal is basically a long tube extending from the mouth to the anus. This you can see in the figure. The tube has different parts. Various regions are specialized to perform different functions. As we all know, we eat various types of food which has to pass through the same digestive tract. Naturally, the food has to be processed to generate particles which are smaller and of the same texture. This is achieved by crushing the food with our teeth. When we eat something, we like our mouth waters. This is actually not only water but a fluid called saliva. Another aspect of food we ingest is its complex nature. If it is to be absorbed from the alimentary canal, it has to be broken into smaller molecules. This is done with the help of biological catalyst called enzymes. The saliva contains enzyme called salivary amylase that breaks down starch, which is a complex molecule, to give simple sugars. The food is mixed thoroughly with saliva and moved around the mouth while chewing by the muscular tongue. It is necessary to move the food in a regulated manner along the digestive tube so that it can be processed properly in each part. The lining of the canal has muscles that contract rhythmically in order to push the food forward. These peristaltic movements occur all along the gut. From the mouth, the food is taken to the stomach through the food pipe or esophagus. The stomach is a large organ which expands when food enters it. The muscular walls of the stomach helps in mixing the food thoroughly with more digestive juices. The digestion in stomach is taken care by the gastric glands present in the walls of the stomach. These releases hydrochloric acid, a protein digesting enzyme called pepsin, and mucus. The hydrochloric acid creates an acidic medium which facilitates the action of enzyme pepsin. The mucus protects the inner lining of the stomach from the action of the acid under normal conditions. Okay, from the stomach, the food now enters the small intestine. This is the longest part of the alimentary canal, which is fitted into a compact space because of extensive coiling. The small intestine is the site of the complete digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. It receives the secretions of the liver and pancreas for this purpose. The food coming from the stomach is acidic and has to be made alkaline for the pancreatic enzymes to act. Okay, bile juice from the liver accomplishes this in addition to acting on fats. Fats are present in the intestine in the form of large globules, which makes it difficult for enzymes to act on them. Bile salts breaks them down into smaller globules, increasing the efficiency of enzyme action. The pancreas secrete pancreatic juice, which contains enzyme like trypsin for digesting proteins and lipase for breaking down fats. The walls of the small intestine contain glands which secrete intestinal juice. The enzymes present in it finally convert the proteins to amino acids, complex carbohydrates into glucose, and fats into fatty acids and glycerol. Digested food now from the small intestine is taken by the walls of the intestine. The inner lining of the small intestine has numerous finger-like projections called villi. The villi are richly supplied with blood vessels which take the absorbed food to each and every cell of the body, where it is utilized for obtaining energy, building up new tissues, and repair of old tissues. The unabsorbed food is sent into the large intestine, where its walls absorb more water from this material. The rest of the material is moved from the body via the anus. We have discussed nutrition in organisms in the last section. The food material taken in during the process of nutrition is used in cells to provide energy for various life processes. This we have learnt in our earlier classes, isn't it? Diverse organisms do this in different ways. Some use oxygen to break down glucose completely into carbon dioxide and water. Some use the other pathways that do not involve oxygen. In our earlier classes, we have discussed about aerobic and anaerobic respiration. The respiration which takes place in presence of air and absence of air. In all cases, the first step is breakdown of glucose, a 6 carbon molecule into a 3 carbon molecule called pyruvate. This process takes place in the cytoplasm. Further, this pyruvate may be converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide. This process takes place in yeast during fermentation. Since this process takes place in absence of air, that is oxygen, it is called anaerobic respiration. Breaking down of pyruvate using oxygen takes place in the mitochondria. This process breaks up the 3 carbon pyruvate molecule to give 3 molecules of carbon dioxide. The other product is water. Since this process takes place in presence of air or oxygen, it is called aerobic respiration. The release of energy in this aerobic process is a lot greater than the anaerobic process. Sometimes, when there is lack of oxygen in our muscle cells, another pathway for the breakdown of pyruvate is taken. Here, the pyruvate is converted into lactic acid, which is also an 3 carbon molecule. This build up lactic acid in our muscles during sudden activity causes cramps. Let us see this in the diagram, breakdown of glucose by various pathways. First, glucose 6 carbon molecule in cytoplasm is converted into 3 carbon molecule. Same in absence of oxygen in yeast, ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy, 2 carbon molecule. Next, lack of oxygen in our muscle cells, lactic acid plus energy. Here lactic acid is 3 carbon molecule. Present, same reaction in presence of oxygen in mitochondria, carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. The energy released during this cellular respiration is immediately used to synthesize a molecule called ATP. The expansion of ATP, adenose triphosphate, which is used as a fuel to all other activities in the cell. In these processes, ATP is broken down, giving rise to a fixed amount of energy which can drive the endothermic reactions taking place in the cell. I think in our earlier classes we discussed about the types of reactions, that is endothermic and exothermic. The reaction which involves absorption of heat is an endothermic reaction. A reaction where heat is liberated, that is exothermic reaction. So here in respiration we come across endothermic reaction. Since the aerobic respiration pathway depends on oxygen, aerobic organisms need to ensure that there is sufficient intake of oxygen. We have seen the plants exchange gases through stomata, and large intracellular spaces ensure that all cells are in contact with air or oxygen. Carbon dioxide and oxygen are exchanged by diffusion. They can go into the cells or away from them or out into the air. The direction of diffusion depends upon the environmental conditions and the requirement of the plant. At night, when there is no photosynthesis occurring, carbon dioxide elimination is a major exchange activity going on. During the day, carbon dioxide generated during respiration is used up for photosynthesis. Hence, there is no carbon dioxide release. Instead, oxygen release is the major event at this time. So far we have learnt about plants. Now we will see in animals. Animals have evolved different organs for the uptake of oxygen from the environment and for getting rid of carbon dioxide produced. Terrestrial animals can breathe the oxygen in the atmosphere, but animals that live in water need to use the oxygen dissolved in water. Since the amount of dissolved oxygen is fairly low compared to the amount of oxygen in the air, the rate of breathing in aquatic organisms is much faster than that seen in terrestrial organisms. Fishes take in water through their mouth and force it past the gills, where the dissolved oxygen is taken up by blood. This is about the aquatic animals, how respiration is taking place in them. Now we'll go for terrestrial organisms. In terrestrial organisms, these organisms use the oxygen in the atmosphere for respiration. This oxygen is absorbed by different organs in different animals. All these organs have a structure that increases the surface area which is in contact with the oxygen-rich atmosphere. Since the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide has to take place across this surface is very fine and delicate. In order to protect this surface, it is usually placed within the body, so there have to be the passages that will take air in this area. In addition, there is a mechanism for moving the air in and out of this area where the oxygen is absorbed. Let us see the diagram in human beings, how the respiration takes place. In human beings, air is taken in the body through the nostrils. You can see in the picture. The air passing through the nostrils is filtered by fine hairs that line the passage. The passage is also lined with mucus, which helps in this process. From here, the air passes through the throat into the lungs. Rings of cartilage are present in the throat. These ensure that the air passage does not collapse. Within the lungs, the passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes which finally terminate in balloon-like structures which are called alveoli, singular alveolus. The alveoli provide surface where the exchange of gases can take place. The walls of the alveoli contain an extensive network of blood vessels, as we have seen in our earlier classes about the blood vessels. When we breathe in, we lift our ribs and flatten our diaphragm, and the chest cavity becomes larger as a result. Because of this, air is sucked into the lungs and fills the expanded alveoli. The blood brings carbon dioxide from the rest of the body for the release into the alveoli, and the oxygen in the alveolar air is taken up by the blood into the alveolar blood vessels to be transported to all the cells in the body. During the breathing cycle, when air is taken in and let out, the lungs always contain residual volume of air so that there is sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed and for the carbon dioxide to be released. When the body size of the animals is large, the diffusion pressure alone cannot take care of oxygen delivery to all parts of the body. Instead, respiratory pigment take up oxygen from the air in the lungs and carry it to the tissues which are deficient in oxygen before releasing it. In human beings, the respiratory pigment is hemoglobin, which has a very high affinity for oxygen. This pigment is present in the red blood corpuscles. Carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than oxygen is, and hence is mostly transported in the dissolved form in our blood.